Now, look, let's move on, James, to the Gama now, where Anthony Albanese has said the feelings are still raw among Aboriginal people over the failure of the Voice referendum. Here's what he said.
Together we gave our all and we fell short. I understand, particularly for those who are dedicated years of their life to this cause, that the pain is still raw.
But Albanese found himself in hot water today after describing Makarrata, which most people understand as meaning truth-telling and treaty, as a simple coming together that was, well, already occurring.
And Peter Dutton was certainly not impressed.
I don't think the Prime Minister heard the Australian public at the referendum. The Australian public spoke in a majority to say that they didn't want the Voice. And if the Prime Minister didn't hear that message, then the Australian public is right to deliver the message to the Prime Minister that they don't want the Voice or Voice 2.0, and they can deliver that message to the Prime Minister at the next general election.
These are not permanent visas. These are temporary visas. There are the same security checks that are in place for people, for Australians, that have been in place, this regime, for a long period of time.
And joining us now is Nationals leader David Littleproud. David, thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening. Is this just another instance of Albo trying to make everyone happy?
Yeah, well, let's just put this in perspective. I don't think we should generalise and think that all Indigenous Australians wanted the Voice to get through. In fact, many Indigenous Australians in my part of the world, in Marinella, didn't support the Voice proposition because it was repeating the mistakes of the past. It was ATSIC Mark II. And they're the victims that live with the scars of that, and they didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. So for the Prime Minister to go to Gama and then to generalise and say that all Australians, Indigenous Australians, actually supported the Voice is actually false. All Australians had a chance to put their voice forward. 60% of Australians made it very clear that this wasn't the pathway forward. We wanted real action, and Peter Dutton and I, the first week after the Voice referendum, walked into Parliament and we moved a bill to actually start not only a royal commission into child sexual abuse in the middle in Central Australia, but also to do a forensic audit of the money that's been spent to ensure that we could close the gap. The Prime Minister's done nothing, and now he's waited till the next Gama to come and have another thought bubble. I don't think he's shown genuine intent about closing the gap and his responsibility as the Prime Minister and saying, let's do something different to what we've done in the past. Let's look at empowering local communities and getting this right. He's simply gone and is shirking his responsibility and saying, oh, this isn't about Makarrata anymore. It will leave the treaty to the states. He wore a T-shirt, if we all remember. It had truth, treaty and voice. And now he's trying to run away from that. He's trying to say, well, that's all the state's job. I'm sorry, Prime Minister. But you either got to believe in what you say you're going to do and stand up to the Australian people and tell them, or you're going to need to get out of the road. But unfortunately, there's nothing tactile happening in closing that gap. And what we need to do is make sure that Australian taxpayers' money, the over $4 billion, is being spent wisely and it's going to where it's needed. And there's mutual responsibility about when you get Australian taxpayers' money, that's not a right, that's a privilege. And with that privilege comes a responsibility to make sure that you do your best to contribute back to society.
David, just to pick up on something you said there, because the Prime Minister did tell people at Gama that truth-telling and treaty, well, the states are now doing that. Is that an abdication of leadership from the Prime Minister? Because to have this piecemeal approach, how convenient, of course, he's got Labor state premiers currently. That may change in October in Queensland. But this seems to me like an issue which, if the Prime Minister believes in treaty, he should be front and centre leading this, not saying, well, you know, it's nothing to do with me, the states are handling that, because we're going to end up with a hodgepodge of arrangements all around the country.
Well, he believed in it, and he wore a T-shirt to prove it, to say that he believed that this was a three-part episode. It was about voice, truth and treaty. And now to walk away and to say, I'm just going to hand this over to the states, shows the weakness of this Prime Minister. Now, I'd have more respect for him if he said, I do believe in treaty and I'm going to go forward. and take it forward to the Australian people. But he doesn't because he knows that the Australian people don't believe in it. And I can tell you, and I make it very clear tonight, under no circumstance can I see that the National Party would ever support a treaty, whether that be at state or federal level. And I say to all the states, we have been a generous country in not only spirit, but in financial support, in making sure that Indigenous Australians get every opportunity, as every other Australian does. This is about making sure, no matter your race or your religion, no one's left behind, and that you don't create mechanisms that just supports one race or religion. That's what's made Australia the great country it is today. And if the Prime Minister believes in this, he shouldn't skimp it, shouldn't abdicate to the states. He should have the courage of his conviction and come forward. But I believe for political expediencies, he's cutting and running rather than standing up with the T-shirt that he proudly wore before the referendum.